Hey guys, welcome to the Do Good podcast. I am your host, Rob Watson, and in today's episode I've got a really great guy lined up for you all. His name's Alex Macarte. He is a musician, but he's also a sound therapy practitioner. He has been in the music industry for many years, starting, in his teenage years and being in bands, and he's been able to travel the world with it and have record deals and stuff. Yeah, probably about 5-10 years ago, he sort of changed a bit of direction and realising the real meditative quality of music and the healing qualities of it as well. So the past few years, he's been training to be a sound therapy practitioner. So he'll run events and he'll work one-to-one with people to with music, doing gongs and all sorts of really fascinating ways. And I something that's really resonated with me, because I've experienced some of these things in the past and how I felt after them and how settled I felt within myself, and yeah, so it's amazing. I really enjoyed this chat, and there's loads of great wisdom in this one, particularly coming all from Alex, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm great to put this out with you guys. So, and also Alex brought along a lot of his music instruments that he uses to do sound healing. So he actually did about a 10-minute session in our space. So if you listen right to the end or go to the end, you can check that out. It lasts for about 10 minutes. So I just wanted to share that one with you guys. We'll get into today's episode, but before I do, I just want to mention that what I've just recently started, I've started a Patreon page up which enables listeners to potentially support the podcast and become members of it. It enables me to continue doing this, and potentially I want to be able to start putting out even more episodes. So if I can get some support in that way on that page, so I'll include a link to that. There's different tiers for it. I think it's in dollars. It tends to be the main sort of platform that everyone tends to use, so I can't really switch that. So if you're in the UK, it just it gets converted and stuff like that. But if you enjoy this podcast, you feel like it gives you some value and you get something out of it, I'd really appreciate it if you want to support it. But there's other ways to support the podcast as well. It's sharing it with your friends, of course, and leaving me a review on Apple Podcasts and places like that. It all helps support it, and even if you don't do any of them and you just listen along and you get something out of it, then that is okay with me as well. So I just thought to let you know that's my Patreon page, which I'll include a link to in the show notes. So anyway, on to today's episode with Alex.
There's just, especially these, because I use crystal bowls as well, but these Himalayan bowls, they're just so warm and rich, and they've got so many harmonics inside of them. They're just really just conducive to putting you in a very, very nice, relaxed state.
I was saying to you that I was listening to your golden ratio frequencies track this morning, for 2 hours, and I just put it on because what I like to do is, before I'll sit down and speak with my guests, is I'll do a bit of research and I'll be reading and writing a few notes. But this was perfect. It's quite rare that I can actually listen to what someone's done in the background.
Oh, excellent! And
I think I actually need a bit more listening to that at the moment. I think it's life can be pretty intense, can't it? And
absolutely.
Throw up a few surprises when you don't expect it, and the more we can do to just ground. And come into our body a bit more, rather than just be in the thoughts all the time.
Absolutely. It's sort of it's weird because it's sort of putting yourself outside of yourself, but also more inside of yourself. It's like a paradox, isn't it? It's like, you're connecting to something that's inside of you that's actually bigger than what you think you are. And sound is just, it's such a good conduit for that. Really, it's. I find with sound, it's so good as an art form, and music and sound, that can touch you in such a deep way that no other art form can touch. And I think that's fundamentally, because when you look at, you take apart what sound is. Sound is just the movement and vibration of atoms. And then you see that everything is made up of atoms. And so nothing is ever motionless or solid as it seems, So the movement of these atoms vibrating, it's literally vibrating your atoms. So it's like getting you in a really like at your core that no other, paintings are beautiful and you can read words that are beautiful, you can see something that's beautiful, but for sound it's got the ability to really make you feel in a way that other art forms can't do as well as sound and music. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's so true. You make you laugh, can make you cry.
Absolutely.
Just out of nowhere. Like, if, you go and watch a great film, without the music,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have nowhere near the emotion to it. Whether you go back and think about, you could go back to E.T. or anything, Star Wars, all these great ones. If you take away them tracks, and Jaws, for instance,
Absolutely.
it's just, it's magic, isn't it? And when you say that about that really resonates with me, and I think with everyone, because you could definitely relate with. So when you hear, say, a musician passes away, they seem to have more of an impact on people than if it's even like a movie star or other stuff. Because and then all of a sudden, like David Bowie passed away a few years ago, all of a sudden all the music's back out, and everyone can take them back to certain times when you listen to it, whether they were kids or family, loads of stuff. And what a career choice, what a path to go in your life.
Yeah, sure.
To do this, to share it, and to bring joy basically to people's life.
Absolutely, yeah. Music is it's like a time machine. It's like a time capsule. Like you said there, it's like you can hear a piece of music and instantly you're feeling the feelings that you felt when maybe you've heard that music for the first time, or, it can really be like a window into a specific time of your life, which is amazing. It's so amazing it does that. It's so... like magic. It really is. It's great. Total time capsule.
So how did it all start for you then, getting into music? Is it, obviously just following influences when you were young?
Yeah, I guess so.
Evolved?
When I was really, really young, like talking like 7, 8 years old kind of thing, I used to, my mother's Spanish, and I used to go and visit my family in Spain a lot in the summers, and it started there, I guess, really. My cousins, much older cousins, they would sort of pass me on music and cassettes and stuff, which, is embarrassingly shocking music at the time, like they were all into sort of like hair metal and Guns N' Roses and all that stuff. And so, that was my first kind of foray into music. Well, I guess maybe even earlier than that, my mother would be playing records and stuff in the house, and I was really young, like Simon and Garfunkel and all that sort of stuff. And then, as I got into my teenage years, my sister, who's a bit older than me, she would pass me down stuff from that time. So, we're talking like the 90s. So it's like grunge and things like that, and Nirvana, which absolutely, that's where it really started to change my life. Where, suddenly you had these musicians that were, they weren't polished, they weren't kind of like, like just made from an industry or something. They were just real. There was sincerity. I guess that's what I sensed as a youngster. You feel the sincerity there, and you realise that punk rock comes into your life, and you're like, oh, I can do this. It looks easy. They don't even know how to play their instruments properly. Like that's great, but they make it feel so alive and amazing. And so as a teenager, I started getting into punk rock, and these older punk kids where I was growing up, they kind of took me under their wing and sort of, here's how you do bar chords. Now you just need those 3 notes, that's it, and you can be in a band, sort of thing. It was amazing. And so I started playing in bands from being a teenager, and then really that just sort of completely took over my life. And as soon as I left school, which I didn't really get along with school that well, I went to college and studied music for a while because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. But I thought I loved music. I didn't really get on with college that well either. And then started playing in bands, like touring and stuff like that, and a bit naive and a bit full of yourself, like, oh, I don't even need college anymore. I've made it. I'm in a band and we've got a record coming out and we're going on a tour, and you look back now, you're like, that's a shocking idea. It's like no money, no comforts, anything like that. So yeah, I did that for a really long time and sort of built up more and more through there. Eventually played in some band that did relatively well, considering as a small band could do, touring around Europe and such. Came to Manchester, ended up joining a collective in Manchester. We're called Gnod. It's been going for a long time, and that's been doing considerably well. We've toured a lot, and since I've been in the band for like nearly 7 years or so, put out so many records and toured all over the place. I've been all over, been to Europe, I've been to America, I've been all over the place with it, which has been amazing. But it's also very stressful because you're living on this sort of fringe of society almost, especially if you've ditched everything else to go full steam with intent into this. So yeah, it's pretty stressful. And as time had gone on, I started to more align with the awareness of what the music was for me, why I play music, what it does for me. For that hour I'm on stage, when you're in the zone, what is that I'm getting at? What, why do I do that? And I found it to be a real exercise in de-stressing or escapism or something along those lines. And so my own music, outside of all of that I made on my own, that started becoming a much more kind of transportative, meditative affair. And my partner, she's now my wife, my partner at the time, she sort of pointed out to me, it sounds a lot like meditation while you play music, right? So that kind of led me on another path where she was like, you should look into meditation. So I started meditating, which then, whole feedback loop, the music starts to become informed by that, and the meditation starts to become informed by the sound. So it's this two-way parallel relationship. And so, this is quite a long story, I'm aware, but it is going somewhere.
No, it's all good.
So, I keep playing in bands and I keep playing in music and having this sort of hour of transcendence on stage, in complete trance and enthralled by it. And eventually I have a friend in London, a really good friend of mine, Mark Wagner, and he said to me, have you ever heard of sound healing? And he would always come up with these, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Really strange, bizarre, interesting avenues. So he said to me one day, have you ever heard of sound healing? No, I haven't. He said, well, it's kind of what you do, you do sound healing with your music. It's what you're doing. But, people do it as it's like a thing, they do it with gongs and bowls and stuff. And you should really look into it. I think, you probably really vibe off it. And so he said, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to go. And he went into the back and brought me out this book, which I brought along with me because it really is amazing. And he brought me this book called The Mysticism of Sound and Music. And it's by a Sufi of the name Hazrat Inyat Khan. And this guy, he traveled to the West, to America, in I think it was like the 1900s, or like early 20th century, or mid 20th century. And he wrote this book. He was a Sufi, and he was kind of responsible for bringing the concept of the healing power of sound to the West. And so I read this book and it completely blew me away. It was enlightening. It also was really good at kind of re-establishing my thoughts and ideas and what I hadn't been able to, put two and two together before. And he seemed to do it so beautifully, of why I play music and what music means to, not just to me, but to universally, really. And so I thought, there is something in here. And then the next time I was in London, the same guy, Mark, he says, hey, my friend Lani, she's a sound healer and she's doing a sound bath in Hackney. We should probably go to it. Have you ever been to a sound bath? I'm like, no, I haven't. So we go to the sound bath, and unfortunately we'd missed the sound bath, but they were all hanging out with all the equipment set up. And we just spent all night hanging out with them, and I was asking lots of questions, and then eventually, plucked up the courage to be like, can I have a go on your instruments? And then it just turned into this sort of free-form jam exploration on gongs and bowls and voice, and it was really something. And Lani, at the end of the night, Lani said, hey, you got a real kind of feeling for this. Have you ever thought about being a sound healer? And I said, well, kind of thought about it a bit recently. So yeah, with their encouragement, it took a few years to get around to doing it. I was touring a lot and was busy and whatnot, and your own confidence, you sort of can convince yourself that, oh no, I can't do these things or whatever. So I went through a bit of that until eventually a couple of years ago, after lots of research, I decided, there's no other time than now, really. I've got to do this because, the music is great. I love playing music, but really, how sustainable is this? And this way seems pretty much more sustainable. It's helping others. I've witnessed other people make careers out of it, and there's nothing worse than having an idea to do something, not doing it, and then seeing that idea be executed by somebody else, perhaps even better than you could, or not as good as you could do, and then that's even more frustrating. So I thought, enough is enough. I need to do this. So I did my research, and speaking to Lani and various other people, I decided to study at a place called the British Academy of Sound Therapy. And I decided to go with them. There's lots of different schools out there, but they've got a very good reputation, and they have a lot of research they're sort of more focused on consciousness and brain and brainwave activity and the sound, how that relates to that. So although they recognize other areas that other schools teach more with energy points and chakras, which I believe are completely legitimate things. I really liked BAST, as they're called. I really liked their approach to research on the brain and how that's interlinked with the sound. And I think it gives it a bit more of a legitimacy, I would say, in today's world, which I think is really good. And so I did a 2-year program with them, which I just completed in December. Got a distinction in that.
Well done.
Thanks. It was a lot of work. It completely took over my life for 2 years, but it was amazingly transformative and really just so enlightening, and a wonderful journey. And then that's where I am now. So I'm here now doing this. Yeah.
Quite a journey then.
It was quite a journey. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I don't know how to start unpicking that. Really. More to delve into. It just first of all, it pops into the book.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you showed me that, I started thinking about the Beatles.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And George Harrison.
Oh yeah.
And I watched an amazing documentary with him recently. It must be like about 4 hour long.
Oh, it's the Martin Scorsese one. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's so good.
I was just like, wow, what an incredible human being.
Absolutely.
And and he, I think you can probably be given quite a lot of credit actually for pulling a lot of that that knowledge
for sure
into the West.
Absolutely.
I know obviously the whole Beatles was with Maharishi when he brought him over, and everyone was behind Transcendental Meditation, but then of course George just wanted to keep delving into that, and I think in that documentary, in that film, you really see him. And actually, I don't even know if it is him, but someone that looks very much like him. Yeah, it's so true. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
And as you say, such healing benefits from it. And as you said, with your course you're doing, people, and what I'm seeing it now with a lot more people want the science to back stuff up.
Absolutely.
Otherwise it can just be considered, it's woo-woo or, some mystical thing. And maybe that's more accepted in other parts of the world because it's just ingrained. But for here, because we've had such a scientific background for the past couple of centuries. So I follow someone called Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Oh yeah, I know this guy.
And I did a podcast that I went down to London and did one of his one-day workshops. And it's amazing how, because science, since Einstein and quantum physics and stuff from the 40s, 50s, people are seeing how much deep it goes, and how much that's actually backing up a lot of the what the mystics would say centuries ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of, it's merging.
Kind of full circle, and then, it's sort of science and religion and spiritualism. It's like the two, they're all intertwined. And as you said, we've just been on a path for so long as a civilization of almost detachment from spirit. And so we do, it's like we need that science to kind of legitimize what's already been known for forever. And it's so interesting because the more science delves into things, the more weight it's giving to these concepts which have been around for centuries, millennia. So so eventually people won't necessarily need to believe the science as much, because it'd be like, well, it's just reconfirming all the things that have already been said. So we're living in interesting times and very challenging times. I think because things are so challenging, it's pushing people to have to seek out, for instance, what you're doing. Absolutely. Yoga, meditation, even just being out more in nature more, because the way we're living in the world, we're so heady, so disconnected, and it's a dangerous path. It is. And maybe it seems like a lot just don't think that's okay. That's the thing, that's the issue. I think it's become accepted to be so stressed and on that hamster wheel, just constantly 24/7. Just the mind just throwing us from one thing to the next, thinking if we don't keep on going, we're going to get left behind. Yeah, sure. And I think that's what it feels like. Even for me, even though I've done a lot of self-inquiry, I'm observing the mind. It's trying to chasing me and pushing me out of the present moment. Yeah. Because where am I actually going to? It's all here and now, isn't it? Absolutely. And the more I can just bring myself present, and that's why what you're doing with that music, it can just that's the basic. If I was to sum it up, it would be just that softness, and brings you back, and I can feel like tingles through my body, and the energy you're talking about, the atoms and the way things vibrating. Sure. That's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling that vibrate. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a few things that's kind of making me think what you're saying now. I mean, for one, I guess the path that we're on as humanity at the moment, it's just not sustainable. It's absolutely not sustainable. So I think now more than ever, it's really imperative to become aware of that, and also to sort of ask yourself, what can you do? What is it that you yourself can do to, answer the need of the time? And the need of the time is we desperately need to have more awareness. We need to have more connectivity. We need to have more consciousness raising activity. So that's another reason why I've decided more to go into this sort of sound area, because anything that I can do to expand that consciousness, I'm going to do. And so, with the sound therapy, I mean, it's been very interesting. I did a year of case studies with clients, seeing clients every week for a year. as part of my diploma. And it's amazing how some people, and I guess it's true for a lot of people, where they really haven't done any kind of self-inquiry at all. And I think there's sort of like, maybe in this country anyway, I feel like the term therapy has really like negative connotations. And, you know, if you say you're going to a therapist, then, you know, it's thought, oh, what's wrong with you? Whereas that really shouldn't be the case. It's you know, you go to see a therapist so that you can not have things wrong with you, you know. Like I've been in America, my wife is American, and she was seeing a therapist in America for a while. The attitude there is completely different. You know, it's almost like, what, you don't see a therapist? Why wouldn't you go and see a therapist? You know, if anything, just to have that objective person to bounce your own thoughts and voice off. And so the therapy that I do with sound, it's a bit similar to talk therapies. We have like a reflective talking process that bookends each sound session. But really, I don't even need to know a lot of the details that the clients come to me with. It's more intuitive and client-based, so it's all based on how they're feeling physically in the body, how they're feeling emotionally and mentally, and how they can connect that to what it is that they feel is impeding flow in their life. So what I found when I was doing these case studies is that there were some people who hadn't had any therapy at all, and they absolutely loved it. There was others who'd been to various different types of therapy all their life, and the sound therapy, they really resonated with it in a big way, where they were like, wow, blown away, like, I'm getting so much out of this, more than I've had with any other therapy form. And really, I feel like I'm not really even doing that much for them. It's like I'm just holding the space for their own exploration. And so through that, you realize that, you know, you have all the answers yourself within you for any issues you have. The answer is all on you. And so looking at that on the microcosm of yourself, yes, it's good to look at yourself and have self-inquiry, but the macrocosm, it's also, you know, we tend to worry so much about all these things that are far beyond our capabilities of sorting out. And really, we shouldn't really sweat it so much, because you don't have to worry so much about those. If you start with just you know, that's the primary place to start. And it's not in a selfish way at all. You know, when I say this to some clients, and they kind of feel, oh, you know, I feel like it would be selfish of me though to just concentrate on myself. And I think it's the least selfish thing you could do. It's like really selfless, actually, because having yourself be the best that you can be is the best that you can be for everything else and everyone else.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think now is kind of more imperative than ever that people really start to have some sort of self-inquiry. We're all looking outside of ourselves for answers, for external sources, and, you know, whether that be through addictions or compulsive behaviors or relationships, we're all looking externally, when really it's all in you. You have to start within yourself at the beginning. Otherwise, you know, I think it was Ram Dass once said something like, the best that I can do for you is to help myself, and the best that you can do for me is to help yourself. And that's kind of true. Yeah. I'm not sure where we were on an answer to your question. I went on a bit of a tangent.
This is good, because I actually wrote the name Ram Dass down here, because
brilliant.
I noticed that you'd shared it recently on your feed about, obviously he passed away on the 22nd of December. Mm-hmm. I had a good friend who was actually in the mill. She passed on. She used to send me like videos to him. This is going back like 2012, 2013. And I'd watched him a little bit, but it just wasn't the right time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'd always see his quotes everywhere. But then in November last year, for something inside me, whatever it was, I was just absorbing hours upon hours of Ram Dass every day. Yeah. Listen to his story. And even the later stuff, and there's a great album on Spotify, which I'll put in the show notes, of all musicians, like, loads of different cool musicians that have done sound overlaying his stuff when he's in his later years, so he's speaking a lot slower. But yeah, he's just, I don't even know where I'm going with this on Ram Dass, but like, you were saying, the best thing you can do is, to help yourself, because self-care is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
For instance, people who give a lot of time to others, maybe the recurrer, or it appears from the outside like they're just putting everything on them, but if they're not looking after themselves, not putting them in a good place, are they showing up for that person as best as they can? Will they be exactly what that person needs? And with Ram Dass, even, once he had his stroke, he said all of a sudden he went from this thing of he was a giver kind of bit of his life to actually having to receive a lot. So he had to play that role. And then he'd noticed in his mind, like, he had to just surrender in a way for people, changing all sorts of stuff. Even when he learned to eat again, it would be like dribbling everywhere. Yeah. And he said it was an amazing lesson for him to see that, it goes both ways. But he certainly deserved it for the amount of good he'd done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed with him, because he was a psychotherapist, wasn't he? And he was very high up in Harvard, and then all of a sudden, I think it was Tony Leary or someone,
Timothy Leary,
who introduced him to psilocybin mushrooms, and then I remember him talking about, it might have been his first experience of how they were at Timothy's house, and even Timothy's son was there, younger son, and a few of them had taken it from the kitchen, and Ram Dass was like, "Whoa, there's too much noise for me. I have to go into the lounge." And he said, "I'm going to sit down." And he goes, "It's okay, it's all right." He was totally like experiencing something he'd never seen before, and he's like, "It's okay, I'm still here." And then he looks down, and his body had disappeared. And he's like, "Oh my God." He goes and gets up and goes and looks in the mirror, and there's no one looking back in the mirror. And it's like, "Oh no, I've really done it this time. I've gone so far." But them experiences, that moment, or probably multiple experiences, has then shifted him to fly off in a completely different direction. To be like, because even when you're talking about like therapy and how amazing it is, and he realised that even to some extent of talking therapy, he was still saying, well, there's limitations to this.
Absolutely.
Because and he pushed him off to go explore India, and then he found his guru. And there's also a thing around gurus, isn't there, in the West? People don't, there's this push towards individualism, and the idea of someone having a guru, there's a bit of a
resistance to it.
There is a resistance to it, isn't there? But when you realise, like Ram Dass says, he says, everyone's our guru. You in front of me here is my guru. The postman, when I'm opening the door for him, he is a reflection of that. And good and bad, as soon as you might be in the car and someone cuts you up, they're again being a test for you.
There's a really nice, I think it must be a Ram Dass quote again that I really like, that's sort of linked with sound, and I think it's an extension of that, where he says, once you learn to listen, everyone is the guru. Yeah. Which I love that. Yeah. It's so true. Yeah, I mean, with that in mind, the sound therapy I work with, the BAST method, the British Academy of Sound Therapy, their method of therapy, they use this process called the 5 R's of experiential processing. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that basically works on resonance, resistance, release, responsibility, and I can't remember this, reflection, of course. And so when I was working with clients, part of my coursework was I had to sort of note where they had felt resistance, where they'd felt release, where they felt resonance. But I also had to do that for each session. I had to do that for myself as well. So then it was really, like you're saying, everyone is the guru. You find out so much about yourself as well, and you realize it's really everything is a feedback loop. You say something to somebody, then they react from that, and then you have that reaction from that, and so forth and so forth. So really, if you learn to listen, you can really find out so much more about yourself and others, which is just what Ram Dass is saying. And I love how Ram Dass, he's really good because I feel he's very easy to understand. He's very humorous, so warm, and I just love his words. They're fantastic, and I use them a lot in my radio show. Actually, I kind of weave them into the music, because as I say, I even see using the radio show. I even see that as a way of consciousness expansion in a more subtle way. So I'm sure people will listen to it and they'll think, oh, this is nice and relaxing and that's great. But even if there's one person who actually, say if there's a Ram Dass thing going on in there and they hear what he's saying and they really, along with the music, and you have this emotive response to that too, then, it's a way of subtly kind of just a little nudge in the right direction of... So thank Ram Dass a lot for that.
Oh yeah, it's just the magic that came through, and what I liked about him as well is how authentic he was and vulnerable as well. Because I think often you can get people and they can be put on this pillar, and it can feel a little bit like, for some, like they're the enlightened ones, and it almost becomes like followers. Yeah. And Ram Dass, it didn't appear like he wanted any followers as such. He was just, people would show up and he would talk, but he would talk about, the challenges in his own life and the stuff that comes up for him. And I think the more of us that can take that as, that's real teachings, for us to be more authentic and to be vulnerable.
Completely.
Because I think if we just see people externally as if they've got it all together and they're in a position of wherever, and if you're struggling in your own life and you've got stuff wrong with you, it can give you that feeling like, I'm never going to be able to get there because I'm wading through all this mud each day and my thoughts are killing me and feel like all sorts of issues. But every single one of us, all 7 billion of us, whether you're homeless or you're a billionaire or whatever position you're in, this life, this earth school is tough. Yeah. It is tough. I heard a great quote once that, down here is like we're getting our master's degree, just being alive now. Yeah. And so I'm grateful for Ram Dass and all the people. And I love, like I said to you, I only came across him properly in November, and then he passes away a month later. And then I found that really, really interesting that I'd absorbed loads of stuff while he was still here on the earth plane. And now you can still absorb just as much, but in a way. But it was a nice reflection for me to take that on board.
Yeah. That's why he's such a great teacher in a way, is because he has this humility about him, and he's sharing his learning process with you, and then through that you kind of find resonances within yourself, and it's a really good lesson to sort of grow empathy, really, which is, I think that's in dire need these days. There needs to be so much more empathy in the world, of kind of really understanding, like you said there, whether you're the homeless guy on the street or the billionaire in the tower, like at core, you're all the same. Yeah. And we all have the same emotions and feelings and worries and anxieties and just different levels of experience, or different filters. We're all having these experiences through our own filter. But really, I think there just needs to be more resonance in the world of finding where we're alike, because I think there's much more that connects people than what separates us. Absolutely.
And it's that connection, isn't it, that if we can, and I'm seeing it a lot more, if we can move towards that, rather than that feeling of competition, that dog eat dog, which has sort of been ingrained for the past few hundred years from, say, certain, philosophies of thinking, survival of the fittest, when actually that's getting dispelled now, but it takes a while for them beliefs to sort of wash away. Sure. And if we can move into that place of collaboration and connection, and I think you were saying about, you becoming a musician early on, you were on the kind of the edge, the peripheral of society, you're kind of making it up as you go along, you're not thinking, buying a house or a mortgage, getting a steady job, you're, floating through. And there's a level of, that's really brave as well to do that, but like you say, there's a level of risk. But I think there's that, people are seeking that alternative way of living because they're seeing The idea of being locked up on a 30-year mortgage,
Yeah.
with working till the 65 with the hope of some sort of pension, as if at that point that's when life's going to be good for you. And then you probably get to that point and you're like, hang on a minute, what? I've wasted the past 30 years to get to this point, and almost sold a bit of a lie to keep you in the machine a little bit. And where I'm going a bit with this, I'm seeing a lot more people looking for living in co-housing spaces, living in community, working less, not needing to earn as much because their income and the spend, they don't need as much because they're not looking to just keep up with the Joneses. They don't need the next car. They don't have to change it every 2 years. They're not thinking, because that is exhausting.
Yeah.
I have been on that path and in that path, and thankfully, probably through the form of meditation, for me to be able to almost stick my head above the clouds for a bit and seeing, hang on a minute, what have I been doing for the past 10, 15 years? There's a different way, because if I continue this way, I heard a great quote once that even if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. So, where's the end game?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, well, I want to enjoy where I am now. I don't want to wait till I've got X amount of money when I'm at some point in the future. It's like, it's bringing me back to here now. So yeah, the idea of community and living more off the land, and I'm really interested in permaculture. There's something just feels so nice about it, and grounding everything, what you're doing, it's all ties into that alternative, but it's going to eventually become the mainstream.
Yeah,
it has
absolutely.
to. If it doesn't, then everything's probably just going to we'll see, because look at the world at the moment. We've got the fires in Australia, we've got very uncertain political landscapes. Everything seems like it's on the edge. Sometimes I wonder how it even just continues. How is it everything?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel it's we as a collective, we need to make those changes, and if we don't, then hello, the world's going to change it for us. So then we're going to start seeing more of these things like the fires in Australia but and not to be like it's not a doom and gloom thing at all. I think kind of again it's mistaken intellect, where we're looking at the outside, the external, rather than looking at what's really going on, where it might seem like, oh, this is the worst of times it's ever been, but in actual fact, I really don't think it is. It's like everything is becoming so much more into immediate awareness. And, you have things like, say, the Me Too movement, where, you could be like, isn't this terrible that we live in these times where this is going on and there's all these men doing these terrible things? It's like, well, that's always been going on. It's been going on forever. Now we're talking about it. Now it's out in the open, and it's our mistaken intellect to think that that's bad. Oh, it's bad because it's in our immediate perception. But that's where it's changing. That's how change happens. You can't change unless you confront the things that need to be changed. So yeah, saying I work with resonance and resistance, so that's like a form of resistance right there. And another thing I found with the sound therapy is, when clients are having resistance, it might not feel very nice for them, but they soon realize, well, that's the direction you need to be concentrating on, because without the resistance, you're not going to have any kind of release from it. You're not going to have any change. You need to confront that for change to happen. So resistance is the pathway to transformation. And I think that's I feel that's what we're feeling right now. It's like politically, what's happening in our country here, in America and lots of other countries, that's just a big mirror being held up to us to be like, well, this is just a reflection of what we've been doing for time memoriam right now. So, if we continue going in this way, it's going to be more like this. Trump is like, he is like a huge reflection of bad side of America. And if anything, I think it's maybe positive that he is the president of America right now, because he's the need of the time. They need to see that that's how bad it is, to make a change, to ignite the spark, to ignite the fire, to make radical change. Yeah. And I say radical change, but it doesn't even have to be that radical. You start from, like we said earlier, from yourself. You start with you. What can you do immediately in your surrounding, in your life, in your immediate surroundings, to make a change? And from then on, that ripples. It has a vibration, and it ripples out, and you kind of have this this idea now to live life as an exemplar. So I'm not perfect, but I'm going to be an example of trying to live my life as consciously and as best as I can. And if other people can see and recognize that, then that's a beginning of some form of change and transformation for whoever needs to see it.
Exactly.
So,
and even if it's just one other person,
yeah,
that sees it,
mm-hmm.
and even if it's no one, but you're the one that is holding yourself to high ideals, you're going about the world trying to just the simple acts of kindness,
mm-hmm.
Saying please and thank you more, just picking some litter up, anything that you feel is going to make the world a better place. And even if it's just so small,
mm-hmm.
it's an act.
Absolutely.
And I think that, it's so true. It's beautiful. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm barely even looking at my notes. And what I love about them as well is when sometimes I do these, and I feel on a few occasions, you just naturally just start talking about the things that I was going to ask.
That's great.
And they're here, just like as you say, it's just it's just that plugged in, connected.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So where are you at now then in terms of? So you've got your diploma. Mm-hmm. You can be a practicing sound healer.
Yes.
And what kind of things are you doing? Are you working on a one-to-one basis? Are you doing events?
So at the moment I'm doing a combination of one-to-one therapy. So I'm seeing clients on a one-to-one basis and doing actual therapy with them. But I'm also doing sort of group workshop events. So, doing sound baths and gong baths in various venues and in yoga studios and things. And that's really powerful and can be very transformative. It's not as deep as a one-to-one session, obviously, because you're in a group, but it's still a lovely shared experience. And so I'm doing that. I'm also I do sort of semi-regularly this drone yoga with a friend of mine who does what she calls drone yoga. So she's a yoga teacher, and she's doing a yoga class where normally her regular practice is with a playlist of sort of ambient music and neoclassical music and this sort of more meditative sounds, and they do yoga to that. And then maybe once a month, I'll come and I'll do a live soundtrack to that with my synthesizers and crystal bowls and voice and samples, and make kind of like a live soundtrack to their yoga practice. And then we finish that with a gong bath, which is really great. So I do that as well. And then I'm still continuing to do music with the projects I play in, with Gnod, my own music. I do a radio show once a month, it's all kind of, the radio show is sort of interlinked with the therapy, and I run a little, what I call a micro label. So I release music from artists who I kind of feel are making music of a sort of transportative nature. So yeah, it's all going on. Yeah, I've got my fingers in lots of little pies. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like I can relate with that, with the things that I'm doing currently in my life and some of the things I'm looking to go more into. We're moving away from the idea of just doing one thing for 8 hours a day in a certain block time, to the point where it might appear like it's all over the show, it's all firing off, but actually it's all just it's a bit more I would associate it with, like, how when you see a child and how it's just like that child wonder and creativity, and one thing they're working on one thing or they're doing something, and it's just there's a beautiful when you see it from a certain point, there's a beautiful flow to it. And what you're doing, it's all, there's a core to it all.
Yeah.
But there's so many different like arms and legs that can come off it.
Absolutely.
And the great thing with that, it gives you much more flexibility for thinking where you're going to go and what you can do next, without feeling like, okay, I'm in this band and that's all it's going to be. If that doesn't work, then I have to go and work in the supermarket.
Sure.
You know, that kind of all or nothing type thing. But to be, you know, multiple things, and maybe eventually some stuff, I think what happens over time, some older things just fall away as you've moved into a new phase.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of like that as well, because I feel that's shows some kind of growth and evolution to what you're doing, which is just completely natural. You know, it would be, I feel it would be unnatural to do the same thing over and over again, forever and ever and ever. You know, life is change; it's constantly change, and I've had my own issues with that. You know, where I've had to kind of. I had a lot of change when I was growing up, so I've had a lot of resistance to change in my life. And over the past few years, it's been a process that I'm still learning, you know, to go with change, and sort of actually change is that's where things get exciting and keep you on your toes and alive, and, you know. And it's funny, as a child, I've craved a lot of time where I've craved the opposite of change, and I've wanted things to stay the same. And then when I get that, I become so restless, and that's where things start to get a little, you know, and then you realize, okay, no, actually, change is going to happen no matter what. You can't, it's unavoidable. So you can either resist that change or go with it. It's sort of like a river. If a river's flowing, you know, life is like the river, and you're going along stream with it, and it's going down a direction for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's going to make a turn, and you don't know where that turn's going to go. So you could try and resist the current, which is never going to work, and all you're going to do is get hit by loads of water and rocks and things. Or you can let go and trust in it, and it's going to lead you in who knows where. But once you take that opportunity to let go, that's where it becomes interesting. The unknown is the most interesting bit, because then you've got an infinite amount of possibilities of where it could go, and you can have some kind of, I don't want to say control, but there is some kind of, you know, you can have some involvement in where that goes.
You've got the paddle.
Yeah, you've got the paddle, but ultimately you're still in the river, and it's going to go where it wants to go. So, yeah, ride with it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful analogy. And it's so true, isn't it? You can just pick, you know, as many times you've just been holding on.
Yeah.
And you literally hold on, and the tension and the pain from holding on, just that you then hold in your body, it's like, and you always hear, don't you, people when they're close to death or the deathbed, and they talk about some of the things that they regret and think things they wish you do. And if the more of us can just like tune into some of them things, and like you say there, just less resistance, because as you say, we've got to, if we want to have breakthroughs in our life, we've got to go to the edge of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
You know, that quote's so, like, you know, you've heard it loads of times, but you know, what's it? Freedom's on the other side of the comfort zone.
Sure.
And we've got to push ourselves. And often, like you say, a lot of us are resistant to change because we know we can play things safe and things can become comfortable. And the idea of something new, sometimes we can charge after something because it's exciting. But some other things might not. It might feel like I've got too much to lose.
Yeah.
But that's only because we know what the past has been up to this point. But who knows how amazing the future can be?
Absolutely.
If we just let go and, like you say, that trust. And I think I can look back at many times in my life where I think, wow, look how that turned out.
Yeah.
Look at that point where at the moment, at that time, it seemed like a really shitty thing to happen, or I really didn't want it to happen. But that moment, that's like that little bit where you're saying the river maybe going to fork off in a different way. That sent me down that path.
Yeah.
That new life path.
Absolutely.
And and like you say, that's the magic.
Yeah, it's really funny because I often have to take stock. Things start getting a bit hairy in life, and I start to get a bit worried. Just like everybody does. But then I take stock and I kind of look back and I think, wow, all these other times where I kind of had this feeling and I didn't know whether 100%, like literally 100% of the time, it's worked out.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm alive. I'm relatively okay.
You're clothed. You've got
Yeah,
food.
yeah. 100% of the time, it's worked out okay. So, yeah, you just need to remember that. I think it's also good to remember too that there shouldn't really be an end goal either, because it doesn't end. It's like it's constantly going to change. So, it's good to have a goal, but don't think that once you're there, that's it. You'll have made it. I've done it. Because then the next thing's going to happen. The next change is going to be on the horizon. It just keeps on going.
The next project.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to actually enjoy the process.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, if it's just as a start and a finish, and then it's another start and a finish, the start and the finishes, they barely hardly any time at all. They're a few percent. There's a 95%. You doing your course. Some people could think, well, I'm going to start this course, and then when I'm done this, I can start this. But you said it was a beautiful thing, self-inquiry, expansion, transformation. And if you can enjoy all of that and be present for it, and we're not always going to be present for stuff. And, and I just thought it popped into me when you were talking about the resistance for change. I think the way we live now, and that's why I think at some point we do need to make that shift in society, whether it's it's someone who's more like a Jeremy Corbyn, or in America it's a Bernie Sanders, who is going to kind of create a system that's in place. So not just to support everyone, because but to have that, but to give people much more of a safety net. So the idea, I'm really encouraged and would love to push for universal basic income.
Yeah.
Because at some point everything's going to technology. Everything. Robots in a very short time are going to do everything. All the cars, everything, all transport, taxi, everything, lorries, is all going to be done remote control.
Yeah.
So at some point there's going to be potentially billions of people without work. And I don't even see this as a negative. I see this as an opportunity for people to finally have time to do the things that they want to do.
Absolutely.
Because I know most, for instance, truck drivers, most of them considered to be some of the most unhealthy people, because they're stuck in a wheel for so many hours. They're not going to be able to have home cooked food and sleep in the back of the thing. So it can potentially free up their time. But what we do need, and I think there's definitely shoots of it and hopeful seeds of it, that we can move into a place where society is, it can hold us a bit more. And if people can have the basic income covered, food, shelter, it gives them an opportunity to sort of
absolutely
really explore this world. The idea of what a Star Trek type of civilization, because at some point money will evaporate, because we won't need it, or whatever that might look like. I think, and at the moment we live in a world where there's that lack of security. I think a lot of us can have that fear about money. Yeah, it's a big one. I don't know anyone at some point. I even remember hearing was it Will Smith, who was getting interviewed by Oprah, and he's must be tens of £1 million over. But he says he was on there and he spoke really frankly about it. He said he still wakes up in the middle of the night fearful that he's not going to have enough, that's all going to go. So, and this is someone who makes 20 million a film, and Oprah was like, what, really? And he's like, yeah. And I think it's because of his childhood. Sure. And I think he made it when he was 18, made $1 million, and then he bankrupt and lost it all. So he's had that traumatic, amazing experience, but then a traumatic experience, which these things go into the psyche, and the ego doesn't forget very easily for stuff, and that's where we've got to take a bit of a step back. And I'm totally go off on a tangent, but I think it all links into the story of this interview and where it's going.
Yeah, I mean, I think with I agree with the universal basic income or something along those ideas. Just a way to put people on more of a level playing field, really, and it should be a playing field. It should be playful. Life should be playful, and for so many people, it isn't. It really isn't. And just think how many people who are not given the opportunities that others have had, who, you know, they could be, we could have seen the next Einstein or someone, but they're, you know, stuck in whatever place they're stuck at. Yeah, and I think as well, it's like, people can say it's kind of naive maybe to think of these utopias and stuff, but, you know, we've got to start thinking of utopias, because literally all we've had, the mass kind of, I feel like the mass consciousness is sort of, I don't know why, but it always seems more geared towards dystopia. You know, you look at films and television and stories and basically people's imagination, it seems to imagine a lot of dystopia. And so, I mean, you look at like your iPhone and things like that, that literally came about because somebody, maybe, you know, a writer in Star Trek had written, you know, oh, we've got these handheld devices that you touch buttons and things. And those kids watched that and thought, wow, what a great idea. And then as they've grown up, they've made that a reality. So literally your mind creates your reality. So if you're going to constantly think of dystopia, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, you know, we really need to start dreaming of the utopias, because it needs to happen in the way it's going. It's not sustainable. So, and it will happen. It will. Because the change is, as I said, change is inevitable. So it is inevitable that it will change. And whether that's for the better or the worse, it's almost, I mean, it's up to us, but it's almost not really even important. It's going to change. So that's the one thing that's inevitable, yeah.
And that ties into when we were discussing before, and you mentioned about, say, for instance, the Me Too movement, or whatever going on, into, you know, seeing about the corruption in politics and banks, and we're living in a time now where, because of there's so much access to information, the lies or the deceit or anything like that, it's got to come to the surface, you know, and that's why it can appear like, oh no, another this has happened.
Yeah.
But we have to get all this stuff out, and we have to see it, and it's also a reflection for us to look at our own shadows as well, because we can say, oh, look at such and such as, you know, treating that, but we're not like, you know, we've got our own stuff to face and to look at in these times. So it can be, it's all a beautiful reflection, like we said before. Everything is our guru or God or whatever, and it's interesting times. Yeah. And I think it comes down to, when you're talking about that idea of going down the stream, we've got our own streams, but we've also got the collective stream of a town, of a country, of the world. And there has to be a point where we kind of have to be like, okay, we have to surrender to this and trust. I've spoke about it in this podcast before, a guy called Michael Singer, who's written The Untethered Soul, as well as The Surrender Experiment. And he's basically said he's just surrendered to life and to the universe for 40 years. And what an incredible journey. He said when things would show up, it would show him that if he didn't want to do it, it showed that he had resistance in him, and he had to work through that resistance. And his life has just gone, it's just been phenomenal. Lots of challenges. But he said everything that just shows up to him, it's like, okay, here's something else for me to learn. Another opportunity for my ego, part of my ego, to dissolve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. It's because life is it's a set of experiences, and it's good and it's bad, it's everything in between, and you know, you have to accept the bad moments too. And as we said, everything is the guru, right? So it's about taking the higher value from any experience. There's always going to be a higher value to it. What can I learn from this experience? What is this showing me? And it's not sort of like, why did this happen to me? It's like, why did this happen for me? Yeah. There's going to be something in here that I've got to learn about myself, or the grander scheme of things, which is ultimately going to aid growth. So,
and that's something that I'm going through a little bit in my own life at the moment, this start of this year. So we got burgled about a week and a half ago, and like, we were out and we get the phone call to say, listen, the police are in, someone's broken into your house. So we're coming home, we've got a half an hour drive. We're thinking, first of all, the cats. We've got 2 cats who are house cats. Are they okay? And then after that, we're thinking about a few things. Has that been taken? Has this been taken? So it's like there's a half an hour drive of completely going into the unknown, thinking, what am I coming home to? And I had a few moments of being like, okay, I'm going to try and surrender to this, but then I get pulled back into it and be like, come in. All the back windows were smashed, glass everywhere throughout the house. We couldn't find one cat for about an hour plus more, thinking, where's she gone? Has she got out? We live on quite a busy road. Is she going to get run over? You know, all the worst case scenarios. We had a few things dotted around the house. You know, they swiped a few stuff, and then it's going through that process, and it's like, as you say, like, why is it happening to me? But actually, what, you know, it's not why is it happening to me, you know, why is it happening for me? And it's bringing yourself to that place and think. But then and then we thought we were getting back on our feet a bit, and then they attempted again just a few days ago. They didn't come in, they ended up going to the neighbours instead and working their way through their house, stole a car and stuff. So you're thinking, okay, I've just been shook, because, you know, our homes are our safe space.
It's like a sanctuary. It's your...
Absolutely. So the thought of someone trampling through your house and pulling all your stuff out, that's really tested me. It's really tested Ruth as well. And we're like, why? You know, you do, and you can think, why is this happening to me? And to be honest, the first time, we weren't even angry with the people. We kind of thought, okay. But the second time, I start to be like, come on. This is a bit much, this now. So I can start looking at that. Well, why is this happening? The benefits of it, all of a sudden, all the neighbours, we've become much more closer with all the neighbours. We've been swapping phone numbers. And it's not even just about, the security safety thing. It's like, it's just that human quality.
Connection,
that we've all got. And sometimes it takes a crisis to bring more of us together.
Yeah.
So, and you know, it's probably going to lead to us actually connecting more with the neighbours, coming round, have a cup of tea and let's do this and do, you know, rather than, and I talked before about this idea of building more community. Yeah. In my head, I'd love to just move to some eco community in Portugal or something. Would be lovely. But actually, I need to create that now. If I want to live in like that something in the future, then I have to create that community now and connecting with people, and even doing this, I'm connecting with people. So even though the idea of getting broken into and getting your foundation shaken, I can see the benefits of it now. That doesn't mean at night when I'm in bed and I hear a noise, I'm thinking, shit, if they come back again. Yeah. And so it's a fine line, but at some point, like I said before, sometimes we look back at a time and think that was really uncomfortable, but that pushed us. Like, for instance, we've been thinking about moving. This could be the thing that actually gives us that push out the door, more so, or anything. So yeah, it's seeing that, isn't it, and seeing the lessons in it. Yeah. You might feel, at some points I'm not quite thinking the blessings at the moment, but the lessons, absolutely, in it, and eventually them lessons will turn to blessings. You're like, okay, great, but at the moment the lessons.
That's a really good way of looking at it. I mean, how much better is that to have that kind of feeling than just to feel all the negatives? Yeah. Which obviously there's negatives, we're getting robbed. It's not really a positive situation. But yeah, that's really great to have at least that thing of positivity, of something that has come out of there. Yeah. It's not just been for nothing. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good.
And even when we first came home and it happened, like, we come back, there was an amazing policeman in the house, very calm. My dad was there as well. So for me to come back from thinking a place of thinking, oh, what's happened, to have a really nice person, like, a police officer, and there's also my dad, who's, your father, and, someone who's looked after you. That feeling was that support. I'm like, I'm supported here, and it could have been so much. It could have been so much worse. Yeah. We could have lost a cat. Something could have happened. They could have tracked, and it didn't happen that way. So it's seeing that stuff, but it is still also like, okay, but yeah, we move on. You mentioned it before, and I thought it'd be worth mentioning. About it'd be interesting to see how, just from my own perspective and my relationship. So your partner, you're married now. They live in different country,
Yeah.
Another continent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that must be tough.
It is tough. Yeah. It's my partner Destiny. So yeah, we met through an artist residency 6 years ago, through Islington Mill, which is where I'm based and where you were once based as well. There was an artist residency in Ibiza, and so we met through there. And then she was coming back to Manchester. She's from New York. Well, she's from Texas, but she's lived in New York for 20 years plus. And she was part of a dance collective, an art collective called Cheryl. There's Cheryl, the party that will ruin your life. It's really hedonistic, great fun, like a queer, sort of like the club kids from an extension of club kids from America. And yeah, so she came to the UK to do a residency and ended up staying with me for the rest of that summer until her visa ran out. And then, we just continued to have this relationship. Little did we know at the time that lots of sort of red tape in the way, and the government at the time had changed the laws on immigration, so it then became a lot tougher for someone outside of the EU to live as a spouse in the UK. So it becomes that it's all sort of down to money and monetary requirements, which it's all down to the British partner to meet. And as a musician, as I said, living on the fringes and just doing my thing, I didn't meet those requirements. So we've been sort of back and forth for the past 6 years. I'll spend some time in New York. She'll spend some time in the UK. And so we've done that for it seems like forever now. Now, thankfully, we're sort of beginning to be in a position where we may be able to apply for the UK spouse visa through. They changed it because it kept on going to human rights courts, human rights cases, because it's a breach of your human rights, basically, an infringement of your personal life. So it kept going to courts for that, and then it went up to the European High Court. It's the highest court you can get to anyway. So it went there a couple of years ago, and they said, right, okay, you can keep your monetary requirement, but it's not quite fair, so you need to open up how that monetary requirement is met. So now we may be able to meet it through savings, through some family helping us with things and sort of having some savings to go off. So that's very exciting. So I'm about to work on sort of putting a visa application together for that, but it's a really grueling process. But yeah, it's been a very unique relationship. Very unique. We got married in 2016 when I was over in New York, and we decided, right, let's do it. Let's just do it, which was great. We went to New York City Hall and did that whole thing, which was really funny. It's like you get a little ticket as if you're at a deli counter and you wait for your turn, and so it's been a really enlightening relationship. Again, just like anything, like we're talking about resistance and resonance and things like that, it's really can be very testing, and you sort of really can see sides of yourself that maybe aren't so great, but really, really good at kind of solidifying this bond. It's like a really strong bond, and you kind of have to make effort to keep it working. I guess what a lot of relationships maybe, I don't want to say take for granted, because that's maybe wrong, because that's not really the way I want to look at it, but there's definitely things that maybe relationships that you meet somebody from your town or where you live immediately, where you're just not aware of these little nuances in relationships that that if you're in a situation like us, you don't get to experience that. Just the fact of like holding the hand or something is like, wow, that's amazing. Like when I'm with her, I was like, oh, I get to hold your hand and walk down the street with you. This is great. Or eat dinner together, or wake up with each other and go to sleep with each other. It's these little things that are really amazing. If you've got that like great. It's so good when you've got it. It's amazing. But yeah, it's sort of, you really have to kind of put a lot more effort into it than I guess you maybe usually would do, which I think is a positive. I really do. I think it's kind of made us have this connection that's so much stronger than it maybe would have been otherwise. And you really try and make the time count when you see each other. But it's a whole learning process. Like I had to, for this visa application, I had to, you've got to build like a timeline, because you need to prove that we're a real couple, not just like a sham. So you have to build this timeline of the relationship. So that was very enlightening. And very, I'm not sure if humbling is the right word, but it kind of made me see lots of times in the relationship I was like, man, I maybe wasn't so good at this time of our relationship. Like, I made decisions and made choices that maybe weren't the best choices to make at that time. So yeah, big growth in just doing that exercise was like a really enlightening process, where I really felt very lucky, like all of a sudden feeling very lucky that, wow, we've stuck through this for a long time, and that's pretty special. 6 years of backwards and forwards. I met one other person a couple of years ago when I was on tour, and I was doing this show in London, and the head of our record label introduced me to this friend of his who was American and had a Swedish wife living in London. And it was like the same situation. And we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's somebody else who's like going through this. And that was so nice to like have this shared experience, because, not many people can, it's hard for them to relate to it, Yeah. It's because it's not a usual situation. But she's amazing though. She's absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that we've been able to keep it going this long.
So what's the longest time you've actually spent together in one chunk during them sort of 6 years?
6 months, I would say, is the longest together, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And then the longest apart has been the last few years, because I guess it sort of relates to what we were talking about earlier. So she was living in New York in a really highly demanding job in Manhattan. She was working for a non-profit organization that helps underprivileged children learn music, learn how to play instruments. Really great, but so high demanding. So she was working non-stop, like constantly working. And then outside of that, she was doing her creative life with this art collective, which was really, really pushing things. She's partying all night kind of thing, and making these really amazing experiences for people, and just really not sustainable. And New York's expensive. It's tough. It's amazing as well. It's absolutely brilliant. It's got everything you can imagine is there, but it can also really burn you out. And so she'd been working so hard at this stuff, and she'd been meditating for some time. That's how I kind of went through that. She thankfully gifted me this meditation practice, and through some kind of unfortunate events, she had some family members that kind of raised her, and they passed away. But that kind of left through some sort of inheritance that left her some opportunity to really make a change in her life. So she left the job in Manhattan and decided that she wanted to become a meditation teacher. So she left her job. She pretty much left the art collective, and then she just went head first into the unknown. She travelled to India, and she was studying there for 6 months, doing this initiator training to be a meditation teacher. And so we had a long time apart through that, because obviously we communicate a lot through other means, Skype. Well, not so much Skype these days, but on the phone a lot through messages and things. And then all of a sudden it was completely cut off. So, didn't see each other for a long time there. But she's gone through this huge transformation as well now. So really, really great. And really amazing that our lives sort of seem to, even with the distance, there's these parallels of where we're both headed in a very similar direction. So pretty amazing, really. Yeah.
So if you got sort of a bit of an image in your head or a timeline of when it could potentially be that she would move to Europe?
Yeah, well, we're looking at the later half of, realistically, I guess the later half of this year, if I can get my finger out and kind of really get going on the applications. So for the past, she qualified from her training a couple of years ago, and then for the next couple of years, she kept going back to assist on the course to help others through the process. And then she's been doing lots of various other amazing things like yoga teacher training. She's just been to a school for Ayurvedic nutrition and cooking, which is absolutely amazing as well. So she's becoming this real powerhouse of health and personal growth, not just for herself, but it's stuff that she can, gift to other people, which is fantastic. So yeah, right now she's in India again on this training program. So we're kind of looking, she'll be finishing there in April. So we've kind of been looking through that time to sort of get the process on the go. It takes a few months. It's a really long process and it's a lot of red tape. And even then we kind of have to ask ourselves, do we really want to be in the UK even, because the visa only lasts for 2.5 years, and then you have to go through this whole process all over again. Which is very expensive. And
so at what point does it turn into residency?
5 years, and you can apply for permanent residency. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's full on, isn't it? It's
very full on.
It's interesting, I think, when it does happen for you, how it would actually be for you to live together.
It's going to be very strange.
It'd be at some point as we do, we get used to stuff, and then the things that you talk about, and it's great when you say that, because it makes me feel like about me having been more appreciation for the simple things, like being able to hold someone's hand, giving them a hug each night, all that sort of stuff. But it'll be interesting once them things just become normal, and then you've gone from, it's like flipping a switch, really. It could potentially be, but I'd imagine you'd be like, okay, we need to still have some space and boundaries in this, because it's been a very unique and unusual circumstances. So
and I kind of feel if we've got through 6 years so far of this, then I think we're sort of on the right track to becoming partners, to meet
absolutely
whatever other challenges will undoubtedly come on the way, as relationships do.
And like you say, because you're both you're both going through your own transformation at the moment, and it's almost like you're going through that because you need that space in your own lives to be fully in that and committed for when you do come. You've kind of, not say you've completed stuff, but you've gone through a big shift to the point where, it's set up for you to be, going ahead with this. Because you never know, like you were saying before, the amount of things that you've, radio, you just finished the 2 years of your diploma, you're in a band, you're doing all these therapies and other things. It might, maybe once you're in that place, some of them things you go, well, I need to be more time needs to go into a relationship than
absolutely
some of the creative endeavours.
Yeah, and I kind of feel I'd be very thankful for that right now too.
You need a break from it all. Yeah, amazing. No, it's really interesting to hear that, because me and Ruth, we grew up 5 miles apart.
Wow.
So, and then, I'm 5 years older, and we met in some nightclub, and it just so happened that I was studying at Salford and going in my third year, and she was just about to start there in her first year. So yeah, destiny for us, even then your partner's got destiny. So yeah, that's it is interesting to hear that, because it's good to get your take on it and how you can be so grateful and appreciative for the small things in life.
Oh, absolutely.
Something I'll just mention it because in the books that I've been reading, the Michael Singer books, he he talks about stuff. Imagine if what you were doing now. So imagine now, even if, well, this was your last day, or it was the last time that I was going to see someone important in my life. Last time I was going to do that, there was just a day left of it. Imagine how much you would appreciate that day.
Oh man, yeah.
And that interaction with that one person.
Mm-hmm.
And all that other stuff, all the other things, you'd be like, none of that matters. I'm just going to be hearing that. Now, if we can take that lesson into just, like, imagine, I think it was some, I can't remember the actual Buddhist monk, his name, and I think it was actually a story from Ram Dass that he spoke about, that this Buddhist monk lived his life as if there was a dagger just hanging above his head.
Yeah.
And at any moment he would die. Because it's true, at any moment, we don't know. We might think, oh, I'm living a healthy life now, I'm going to be 80, 90, well into my hundreds. But you just never know. You never know what your soul plan is and at what point you're going to depart this.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can live like that, but not in a negative way, oh, it's the last, but to embrace.
Yeah.
Life
So every day becomes like a blessing, you know? I'm still here.
Wow, look.
It's great.
Yeah.
Because it's true, because one day it won't be. And, you gotta make the most of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we mentioned a few people. You showed me a book. We talked about Ram Dass. Who else is sort of inspires you now? Whether it's like a book that you can't get enough of, or it's a particular teaching of something that kind of it's where you're at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard to pick just one really. Ram Dass has always been a steady one now. Hazrat Khan, the book that I just mentioned there, is brilliant. There's also Destiny's Teacher, Tom Knowles. He's really great. He's got a great podcast called The Vedic Worldview, which is really good, enlightening and really wonderful. But I think that I'm just kind of buzzing on, just like you said, just being alive. It's great. I just really like having as many experiences as I can and learning from them. And really, as we touched on earlier, it's like everyone is the teacher, really, I feel like one thing that the course I've been on has taught me a lot more of is to listen. I just feel like I'm listening a lot more to everything, listening in a completely different way than I was before. And that way, everything becomes the teacher. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautifully summed up. So last couple of questions then. So I asked this to all my guests. So this podcast is about sharing what good people are doing and how they're helping people around the world and with whatever they're doing. What would you say to someone who is looking to go out and do their own bit of good in the world? Maybe they're in a position where, they want to make that change and that shift.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely go for it. As I said earlier, ask what you can do. What can you do to help raise consciousness, help expand warmth, expand empathy. Everybody has something that they can gift. And I feel like if you put your intention on that, then that's where things will fall into place, and you'll succeed no matter what. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So where can people check you out then? Where's the best way to go to? Do you want to hear your music? Do you want to check out the radio show?
Okay,
do you want to book on to have a sound healing session with you?
Yeah, so there's a few places. So there's goldenratiofrequencies.com, and that's primarily my label website at the moment. I'm still working on making a therapy website for that too. There's a Bandcamp where you can hear the music I release on that label, which is goldenratiofrequencies.bandcamp.com. I have my radio show on NTS Radio, so that's nts.live, and you can search on the golden ratio frequencies, and that should come up. I have hours and hours worth of radio shows on there. You can follow me on Instagram. I have golden ratio frequencies on Instagram. I also have my own personal Instagram, which is Gnod, very weird spelling, AHRKH_GNOD. I don't know why I chose that name and spelling at the time, but it's just sort of stuck. So there's that. And then, yeah, you can find me through those channels. That's probably the best way to find me. I'm pretty active on Instagram as a social media platform, and I'm reachable through there. And if anyone wants to book in for any kind of workshops or any sort of one-to-one therapy, then you can reach me through there. You can hear my other music, Gnod. Just search Gnod on Google. There's loads of stuff will come up. That's GNOD. And I'm about to release my first recordings in years under my own solo name, which I mentioned before, AHRKH, and that's going to be coming up on Golden Ratio. So if you just keep an eye out, that'll be coming up in the next month. It's my first solo release for like 5 years or something. So it's old material, but it's new to everybody else. So it's old to me, but it's new to people. And so yeah, that's the channels to reach me on.
Sounds amazing. I'll include links to all of them, so people can check them out. How do you pronounce your surname? So when I say it,
It's Macarte.
Macarte. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Get it right, otherwise.
Lots of people think it's Scottish. It's not. It's really weird. My dad got into researching family tree, and it's a really weird name because it's like not a real name. It's a stage name from a circus, and it was the biggest traveling circus in Europe in like, I can't remember, Victorian times, and it was this Madame Macarte who used to have this circus. That's where it comes from.
That's
so
amazing.
the circus has never ended. I'm still on it. It's brilliant. They had like lion tamers, they had slack rope walkers, really crazy stuff.
Wow, that's incredible. Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. It's felt really enlightening for me, and it's a great way for me to spend my afternoon.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Brilliant. There we have it, guys. There's today's episode all wrapped up with Alex. And stay tuned to the end of the episode where you can get a sample of Alex's sound healing recordings, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and it was just exactly what I needed and just what my home needed actually at the time as well. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, guys, again, please share this with friends and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And like I said, I've just started my Patreon page, so if you feel the desire to support it in more ways, then please become a member on there. So anyway, guys, play it out now with Alex's healing bath, and until next time, have a good one.